So currently, if we add a new entry, I'll add 6 and set this to -666. And if we jump to the entries table on Supabase and refresh, we can see our entry here. And the order number is currently set to 1 because when we created the new order column, we set the default for this column to 1. But for this particular entry, this number should be 6. So I'll just manually update that here and jump back to Moneyballs. So what we could do here is when we create a new entry, we could work out the current highest order number, which in this case would be 6, and then add 1 to it, and then add this order property when we create the new row on Supabase. So let's jump back to storeentries.js. We'll jump to the add entry action, which is here. So when this action is fired, we pass an object with the name and the amount for the entry, and then we use object assign to add this paid property. Let's also add this order property here as well. I'm just going to break this up onto different lines to make this a bit clearer. Let's add a comma, and we'll add this order property. We could create a helper function to generate this order number. So I'm going to set this order value to generate order number, parentheses. Let's create this helper method. So I'm going to copy this and jump down to our helpers, and I'll put this at the top. So I'll create a new constant called generate order number and set this to an arrow function. And what we want to do here is return a new order number. We could use the math.max function to figure out the new order number. So for example, let's say we had an array. I'll just call this order numbers. And let's say we had an array of numbers here from 1 to 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So to figure out the maximum number in this array, we could do math.max and then pass in this order numbers array using the spread syntax. And this should return the number 6 because that's the highest number in this array. But we want to return a number that's 1 higher. So then we just want to add 1 to this. And then we can just return this. So let's save this and reload and see if this is currently working. So I'll add an entry called 7, set the amount to 777 and hit enter. And if we jump to View DevTools and Pinia and entries and look at the entries array, we can see this new entry here and it has set the order number to 7. Help me out with a quick like, comment, share, or subscribe. However, we're currently hard coding this array of numbers here. So what we need is an array of the actual order numbers in our entries array in our state. So we can use the map function to do this. So instead of hard coding this array, we can grab our entries array at entries.value and fire the map function on this. And this is going to loop through each item in this array, our array of entries. So as it's looping through, we could use entry as the placeholder. And each time it's going to return something from this item in the array and add it to an array. We want to return the order property. So we could just set this to entry.order. So this will create an array of all of the order numbers, just like the array that we hard coded before. So let's save this and see if it's working. I'll reload again, add a new entry called 8 and set it to -888, hit enter. And if we jump to View and Pinia and entries and look at the last entry, we can see it has added the correct order number of 8. So it's currently working when we already have some entries. It's adding the correct order number to the new entry. But let's see what happens if we have no entries to begin with. So I'm going to jump to Supabase and the entries table and click this checkbox to select all of the entries and click on delete and delete. And we now have no entries. So let's try and create a new entry called 1, set the amount to 111, and we see this Supabase error. Could not add entry to Supabase. So let's try and figure out what's going on here. So I'm going to move this over to the right and I'll jump back to storeentries.js and jump to the add entry action. Let's see if we can see what it's setting this order property to when we create this new entry object before we insert it into the entries table. So let's log out this new entry object here and click on save and reload, clear the console and try and add an entry again, 1 and 111. And it's logged out our entry and we can see it set the order property to infinity. So why is this happening? Well, if we just jump down to the generate order number helper that we created, while I'm here, I'll just get rid of this comment. So this map function is creating an array of numbers of the order numbers, but because there are no entries in the entries array, this is going to set order numbers to an empty array. And because we're passing an empty array to this math.max method, it seems to be returning infinity. So what we can do here is after we create this order numbers array of the order numbers, we can check if there are some order numbers in that array. And if there are no order numbers in this array, then we'll just set the new order number to 1. So after this order numbers constant, I'm going to add a new constant called new order number. And we'll use a ternary if statement to set this. So we'll set this equal to a ternary if statement. So if order numbers dot length, as in if we have some order numbers in this array, then in that case, we're going to return this math.max method plus 1. Otherwise, we're just going to return 1. And then at the end here, we can just return this new order number constant. So let's save that and reload and see if this is working now. Add a new entry called 1, set this to -111, hit enter, and you can see it has set the order number to 1. And if we jump to the entries table on Supabase, the order number has been set to 1 here as well. Before we move on, let's just remove that console log in the add entry action and save that. Let's just once again make sure it's working when we add new entries. So I'll just add a few more, jump to Supabase and reload the table. And yeah, it's still adding the order numbers correctly. Get the full course, including authentication, row-level security and policies, database functions and triggers, storage, edge functions, and running Supabase locally from makeappsacademy.com or click the link in the description.